Good morning, everybody. It's been a while. Been a few weeks since we put a video out, but we are back. The heat has settled down here in Maryland. Ball season has settled down here in Maryland. So we're going to get back into it here, coming into the cooler weather. Deliveries are starting up. Lots of phone calls coming in. So today we're going to talk about whether or not you can dry wood in a pile. And I've got some experience now, so we're going to go through things. And for those of you who might still be contemplating or on the fence about piling your wood instead of stacking, we're going to answer a lot of questions today. So everybody loves the look of a clean, tight stack of firewood, right? It feels traditional, shows off the work you've done. It's kind of a badge of honor when you get it done. You can look at it. We've talked about that time and time again throughout the course of this channel. But there's one thing, if you're actually in the business of producing firewood, something that I've learned, or even if you just want to move a lot of it efficiently, stacking is painfully slow, right? It takes a lot more time. So today we're going to break down exactly why producing firewood in piles is way faster than stacking and what it means in terms of labor hours, drying quality, and production costs, and why, if speed matters, piles win every time. Stick around. All right, so like I said, if speed matters to you, then this is the video you want to watch. If speed of production time is of no concern to you, if you've got all day, all the time in the world to split the wood that you need for each year, then you should move along. This is not going to be the video for you. But I know a lot of us have already made the switch or are considering the switch. You know, I come from a history of neatly stacked rows down the line here in the wood yard, and I have made the switch, and I just want to convey what I'm learning along my journey. So I'm going to break this down into several sections today, and I'll tab it in the timeline here. So if you want to skip to a certain section to hear about certain aspects of the piling, you can look down below and skip to that section in the video. But section one I want to start with is handling time. Time spent handling the wood, right? When you stack, you're doing what I call double or triple handling. Here's the process. You split a piece of wood, you take it off the splitter. Gosh forbid it comes off the splitter and piles up on the ground. You bend over, you pick up that piece of wood, you carry it to where you're stacking. It might only be a couple steps away, and you stack that piece of wood. Now, to keep your pile straight and level and to keep it from eventually tipping over, you might have to readjust that piece of wood a couple different times. Now you've touched that piece of wood 2 or 3 times already, and that's what I'm talking about when I say double and triple touching the wood. So now compare that to piling. You split the piece, you toss it into a pile right off the splitter. As it comes off, you just toss it ahead into the pile and you're done. So you've only touched it once. One motion, one lift, and you're moving on. So where this adds up is a single cord of firewood contains roughly 500 to 700 pieces of wood, depending on the size of your splits, right? So if you're stacking, you're essentially doing 500 to 700 extra motions to line up that wood. Over 10 cords, that's 5,000 to 7,000 extra bends, extra lifts, extra wood placements. So it does add up really quickly. That one piece of wood doesn't seem like a big deal, but as you start compounding that and combining that, it certainly does add up. Stacking 1 cord of wood normally takes about 1, maybe 2 hours, depending on if you're in a hurry, if you've got a fast pace, or if you're taking your time. So let's call it 1 to 2 hours to stack a full cord of wood. Tossing that same cord of wood into a pile, about 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. That means you've saved 30 minutes to over an hour per cord of wood. Over 10 cords of wood, that's 1 full day of work that you've saved. All right, moving on to section 2. Section 2 will be equipment efficiency. Let's look at equipment. If you're serious about firewood, you're probably not splitting everything with just an axe, right? Many of us start out that way. If you're just splitting wood for your own personal use in your home, you may be just using an axe. But if you're splitting a larger, moderate to large volume of firewood, we're probably not just using an axe. You've got a splitter, maybe even a processor, right? With a splitter and a conveyor setup, the wood comes right off the machine, goes up the conveyor and drops right into the pile. You can keep working non-stop. You are not at the mercy of anything. Just basically, you're moving as fast as your equipment will run, right? There's no stoppage. If you're using a loader or a skid steer, you can scoop up a bucket and dump it into a pile in seconds. It doesn't take long at all. You get that pile in front of the splitter. You bring in your compact tractor, your skid loader, whatever you've got. You take a scoop out of the pile, you dump it wherever you're going to be piling your wood, and you can continue splitting. That's pure efficiency, right? That's to me, that's the best way to get it done. But stacking, on the other hand, almost always requires handwork. Machines can't do it for you. Technology has not evolved to the place yet where we can go buy a machine that will stack wood for us. I know a lot of us have requested that some manufacturers try to come up with a way to do that, but I don't see that ever happening, to be honest with you. Every piece of wood is unique, every piece of wood is different. It will take a very expensive, complicated piece of equipment to be able to stack wood. So if you're stacking, it's handwork. Even with a conveyor, you'd have to stop your production when the conveyor creates that pile to carry the wood and place it neatly into your stack. In a commercial firewood operation, this creates a bottleneck. You're going to have a stoppage. You're going to have to stop splitting to stack that firewood, to get that pile knocked down, and eventually come back to work splitting more firewood. Your splitter can only produce as fast as your stacking guys can keep up. If you're doing it by yourself like I am, or you've got a couple guys helping you, I can guarantee you if you're running a modern commercial grade splitter, a couple guys are not going to be able to keep up stacking with these machines. With piling, the machine sets the pace, not the human labor. That's why piling integrates seamlessly with mechanized operation. If you're running machines, if you're running equipment, then piling is the seamless way to do it. And it's also why stacking slows everything down. So here we go. Here's the part that you all are probably waiting to hear about, and it's the big myth: drying quality. I don't know if you can tell, but we have started digging into this pile. I'm at the back of the pile right now where we have dug into, and I'll step forward to where the pile used to be. So we're a good 2 to 3 feet in from the bottom and getting into the meat of the inside of this pile here. So I'm checking as we go to see how things are going as far as drying time goes. This is going to be the part that some people are going to have some conflict with, or a little bit of back and forth. A lot of us, including myself until recently, said stacking your wood will make it dry better, more efficiently. You got to stack your wood. That's the myth. The truth is, wood dries because of airflow, sun exposure, and time. Whether it's neatly stacked or piled loosely, the physics are always the same. Now, there is an argument as to where you're piling your wood and where you're stacking your wood, right? We all can understand the difference between stacking or piling wood underneath trees and shade in a closed environment where there's not a whole lot of airflow, versus doing something like this where you're out in the middle of a field, you've got sunlight pretty much all day and airflow across the field pretty much 365 days a year. So that's a unique situation. If you have the availability to do that, you're going to have much better results. Now, in a pile, the outer pieces are going to get hit with the sun and the wind, obviously, first. They start drying immediately. You can see that by the discoloration in the wood. Even when you're stacking your wood, you can see that top layer of wood on your stacks starts turning that gray color, right? Getting that whitish grayish color. And then as you dig into your pile, even after your wood is dry and seasoned, you dig into that pile, the center of the pile doesn't have that color change. Same thing is true in a pile. But as that wood on the outside of your pile dries first, because it gets the sun and the wind first, it creates a moisture gradient. I know it's kind of a technical term, but it's a moisture gradient where once that outside wood starts to dry, it's going to start to pull the moisture out of the wood that's beneath it. And that continues all the way into the pile. So the outside wood drying actually helps to pull the moisture out of the wood from the inside. Air still sneaks through all the little air gaps in the pile, especially if you don't pack it real tight. Now when you're talking about stacking, that's kind of where I can understand the difference. You're stacking your wood tightly. You know, if you're stacking a quart of firewood or even a third of a quart of firewood in a 4x8 stack, you're trying to stack that wood, put that puzzle together and make it as tight as possible. Well, you're eliminating air gaps. There's still air gaps there, but you're eliminating them as much as possible. With a pile, there's much more air gaps. That air is going to flow through there in a random pattern, much more so than you would in a stack. So evaporation happens at the surface. The more surface area that is exposed, the faster the drying time is. You've got a ton of random angles, edges, and air gaps. Air circulates in unexpected ways, and that surface exposure will still do its job. So when people say stacking is the only way to dry their wood, they're really just talking about neatness, not necessarily about the science. Sun, wind, and time are what you need to dry wood. Obviously also, you want to keep that wood up off the ground. It's the same whether you're piling it or stacking it. You got to keep your wood up off the ground. Now what I'm going to do here right now is I'm going to pull a random piece of wood out of the center of this pile, and we're going to take it over to the axis. We're going to bust it open, and we're going to check it with a moisture meter and see how well this wood is dried. All right, let's find us a piece of wood here. I'm going to find a piece of oak because that obviously is the hardest to dry. So here's a piece of oak from the center. Let's get a bigger piece. That's kind of a small split. All right, here we go. Here's a piece of oak. We're going to take this up to the axis and bust it open. All right, here we go. I'm going to check this piece of wood we just split open. Right down the middle. $19, $18, $19.1 is the highest I've seen. 19.3 I think was the highest. So that's split wide open, right down the middle, piece of oak. That wood's been in that pile, covered up since before Easter. So we'll say at the latest we put it there in April. May, June, July, August. It's been there for 5 months. 5 months and we are below 20%. So that's real-time stuff there before we move on to the next section here, right? And I'll be completely honest with you, I've been checking the wood in that pile as we've been going. We've delivered a couple cords out of that pile already so far, and I've been randomly checking it. The highest reading that I've received coming out of that pile so far has been 21.4%. And I sent it. 21.4%. By the time October, November, December gets here, that wood is going to be well at 20% or below and ready to burn. So 21.4 total transparency here is the highest number that I've seen. You just saw right there 19 to 20 I think is going to be the average of what we're getting out of there right now. Only 5, maybe 6 months in tops. Like I said, I can't remember exactly. We were just going by the worst case scenario if that wood got put in there sometime in April. So I'm happy with that. Now moving on to the next section, which I believe is section 4, is what I call the big advantage, and that is just saving time. For every hour or for every cord of firewood that you produce, If you're piling instead of stacking, you've saved roughly 1 hour in that day. So over the course of however many cords you're doing, 40, 50, 100 cords a year, you're saving an hour for every one of those cords you've done, which in the end gives you more time for more splitting, more piling, more production, or to be honest, for me personally, more time with my family, more time to go and watch my kids' games, more time to spend doing other things, hunting, fishing, playing golf with my son. You know, that's where the big advantage for me personally comes in, which is the whole reason why that EVO is here in the yard, is just for time. So piling and equipment, saving time, that's the big difference right there. All right, I've got 2 more quick sections for you and we'll wrap this video up. Section 5, real world numbers. I've got some notes written down here, so I'm going to put this into some perspective. 1 cord of wood, we all know that's 128 cubic feet, right? Stacked. Not piled, stacked. 128 cubic feet is 1 full cord of firewood. So if you're stacking 1 to 2 hours per cord by hand versus piling 30 to 45 minutes per cord. So let's say you produce 20 cords a year. Pretty common number for somebody heating with wood and maybe trying to sell a few cords of wood on the side. 20 cords, that's a respectable number. That's 20 to 40 hours of work stacking your wood. Let's go on a high end and say you spend 40 hours stacking 20 cords of wood. That's basically a full week's worth of work, right? 8-hour days, 5 days a week, that's 40 hours worth of work. If you're piling, you've turned that 40 cords into about 10 or 15 hours worth of work. That's a 10 to 25 hour time savings. The difference between a full week's worth of work of stacking versus a couple of afternoons or evenings when the sun starts to go down and it's more pleasant to work, tossing the wood into a pile. If you're producing more than that, the time savings gets even bigger. So plug your number into what you're doing and work out the math for you and see if it's worth it, right? And finally, I'm going to close with this. The only real advantage of stacking, again, this is my opinion, because I've done it both ways now. The only real advantage of stacking is if you're short on space, it takes up less room, right? More compact takes up less room. So if you're short on space, that's an advantage. The only other advantage that I see is how it looks. Very, very pleasant, neat, squared away to look at, which I think is the biggest advantage of it all. It's something nice to show off. If you go back in my earlier videos on this channel and you see the long rows of stacked firewood, looking at it from the highway going by up here, I mean, it really, really did look nice. And I enjoyed having stacks of firewood, don't get me wrong. Very, very rewarding to come down the driveway and see all the work that I've done on full display. However, you got to weigh it out for yourself. And for me, doing about 50 to 60 cords a year so far, trying to get to that 80 to 100 cord mark, it's just not worth it to me anymore to do the stacking and to just constantly be stressed out about having enough time to get done what I want to get done, plus still get to all the activities and events outside of this wood yard concerning, you know, my hobbies, my family's sports, going out with my family, enjoying the boat, enjoying the weather, going to games. And I'll be honest, I was a little nervous when I made the switch to piling. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose a whole year because I'm going to dig into this pile and it's going to be either not dry or it's going to be full of mold or there was going to be some problem and I was going to be even in a worse situation than I was before. However, here we are, getting ready to deliver firewood, and it's ready to go. So there you go. Hopefully I answered some questions for you. If you have any more questions or comments, leave them below and I'll do my best to answer them. I'm not the only one on this journey transferring from stacking to piling, but I wanted to pass along my knowledge and what I'm learning along the way with you. So glad to have you all back. Hopefully we'll see you again here next Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. I hope you all have a great week and take care.